Well, now let's take this thing off real quick so you can see me because that's what we do now. Hi. So, first of all, before we get started, let's see who's out there in the room. There's a lot of people already 12, 13 people. My goodness. And I even was a little bit late showing up. But so Neil is there, Bree is there, is it Iphion is there, Bobbert, Ross, Gilbert. Oh man, if you haven't yet put a comment in there, go ahead and do that so I can say hello to you. But welcome. It's so great to have everybody here. Let's say hello real quick to Mary and her friend Kimiko. Mary, how you doing?
I'm good, thanks. I'm doing great, thank you, and hey, everybody. Thanks for being here.
It's nice to see you again. Hey, John Baca, how you doing? And Dale, good to see you there as well. And Kimiko, how are you?
Hi, I'm really good. Thank you for having me on,
Oh,
John
it's
and Joe.
nice to have you here. So you are a friend of Mary's from Savannah?
Yes, I moved to Savannah. God, it's now 3.5 years, maybe 4.
What a
Yep.
beautiful place.
And it's gorgeous right now. The weather's perfect. Grateful for every single day.
Nice. Not so great here yet.
Oh,
And there's someone that if you are commenting through Facebook, I won't see your name. That's okay though. You're still able to comment. So basically, for those of you who are new to this live stream, what we're going to do today, we have our guest is Kimiko, and she's going to share her story. She'll speak for maybe about 20 minutes, whatever she likes to do. And then we will open it up for comments and questions. So, like, if there's something that she says that you relate to and you want to share your experience, you can do that either in the live chat while we're talking, or you can call in to our toll free number, and I'll put that number up as we open the phones up. Hey, Tyler, good to see you there. So that's basically the format there. We're going to have a story that we're going to listen to her story, and we're going to have questions and comments, and a conversation will flow from that. And I guess we may as well get started. Are you ready, Kimiko?
yeah. Well, as ready as I'll ever be.
Lay it on us. Lay it on us.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I see Rochelle's here too. Yay. Hi,
Yay.
Rochelle. Hi, this is a new thing for me. I've never done a podcast before. Thank you, Mary, for inviting me, and thank you, John, for having this here. It's a gorgeous setup. So yeah, I'm coming in from Savannah, Georgia. And if you had told me, okay, so I've lived here for 3.5 years, almost 4. And if you had told me I'd visit Savannah or even live here 5 years ago, I'd have been like, what? I'm from New York originally. I grew up there. I was born in Brooklyn and grew up in New York City, Queens, Long Island mostly, and a little bit in Ohio when my dad moved there for a few years. But we came back and went to high school there. And I love that there's a timer in the corner. Thank you. Um, and what I was saying to Mary and to John is I haven't had to tell my story in a long time. And it's a good thing, just like sponsoring's a good thing, because it reminds me of where I came from and how I got here. I love to say, I am Kimiko, I'm in recovery instead of AA now. And I like that this includes the whole recovery community and the thing I love most. And I think it's the strongest, biggest part of my life now about secular AA is how inclusive it is. I don't know if people like that word, but I do. I am, if you can tell from my name, Kimiko. Oh, my last name is Gelman. My married name is Prosky. Is that I am, I'm by my very nature two very different things. I grew up in a very secular and somewhat, in some parts of my family, Jewish family. My dad is a Jewish guy from Brooklyn, and my mom was from Okinawa, Japan. And I didn't really grow up with her. I had kind of a tumultuous childhood. She got sick mentally when I was young, before I was 3. And I went to go live with my Aunt Noga, my dad's sister, who's, you know, very Jewish, and I learned all about Jewish traditions. Pesach is coming up, Passover is coming up really soon. So Judaism, the traditions give me comfort. They remind me of my Aunt Noga, my cousin Ezzy and Charlie, all the kids my cousins I grew up with. But me and my brother started out. I'm starting into my story already. Um, uh, it was kind of violent, and it was a lot of mental illness, and nobody knew how to handle it. My dad came from his father, left, went back to Israel when he was young, and he was raised by a single mom in New York City, and very hard, lonely life. And so he didn't really get a lot of tools on how to be a dad or even what partner to choose. And while my mom had a big heart and a loving nature, she was mentally ill and very isolated in Brooklyn when my dad brought her there as a young man. And she ended up leaving us, going to a hospital, and after much drama, and my brother and I went to go live with my aunt, where I had 3 great years, and then my dad remarried my stepmother, who raised me as her daughter, and she's from Guyana, which is South America, and she's since converted, and she's like, American as can be, but like her background is from another country. And so I've had a lot of different influences in my life. And growing up in New York, the only people who looked like me and my brother were me and my brother in my family. I did not grow up with my mom, so that was just a very suppressed uh, part. They didn't tell me much about my mom growing up. All I knew, it was something to be ashamed of, which I really identify with ACOA people about that, like the denial when it comes to alcoholism, and the like it doesn't exist, and what you're feeling isn't really a good feeling, and to just not talk about it and to act as if everything's great, which is what I learned how to do. I learned to smile and be the people pleaser and all of those things growing up, so that I could survive and or thrive, really, is how I thought of it. And I ended up using food is what I think is my first addiction, to calm myself. TV, reading, anything to just check out if I felt like it was too unpleasant, and or my feelings were not acceptable. And I particularly didn't like violence or screaming and yelling and stuff like that. But I grew up with a lot of passion in my family. They're very loud, passionate people. And and loving too, but I learned to not express that, because even though it was there, that it wasn't safe. And so I grew up with that, and then I finally found an outlet when I was younger to express myself creatively, and and I also learned how to meld into whatever was around me. Just figure out what you needed, and I would kind of do that. I would be that person. Like when we moved to Ohio, I was 12, and I had a thick New York accent. I'm from Long Island, right? They made a lot of fun of me. And so I lost that accent pretty much, except for when I'm talking to my dad, or when I go back to New York, or if I listen to a lot of things New Yorkies. And, and, and so like that kind of thing, I felt like Zelig, if you know that Woody Allen movie. I would just kind of change. I grew up in this like really urban neighborhood, so I became really urban and tough, whatever it took. And it was really hard to find out who I was. And lo and behold, I became in the performing arts. No surprise. Um, and I like to entertain people, but behind a character, you know, not really me. And I had some really strong early success as a young person. I got out of my house as soon as I could and started living on my own in Manhattan, and then with a guy. And that was probably another addiction of mine, relationships. Um, and, you know, I, I have to give myself credit. I didn't do very unsafe relationships. I was in unsafe situations, but I had safe partners, kind of. They took care of me to the point where I didn't, anyway, they were took, but I just, and I'm coming to my alcoholism pretty soon. But the guys, and then work, I became a lot of success, almost too much success young as soon as I started. And and so I was addicted to that, like work. And I was living life on a very high, intense level. That's also another addiction, like, just being so busy and so intense that I don't have to think and I don't have to be still. I did not know how to be still. And then my mother died. And that's, I think, when my drinking, because it would be like I'd spent a year smoking pot. I was with a guy I didn't like, so I'd smoke pot because he smoked pot, and then could obliterate really relating to him. It was food, it was a little bit of alcohol, but my alcoholism, where I found something work, which had saved me always. I would be drinking while I was working. That was my last, yet for me. And then I started drinking when my mom died. Um, that relationship has always been a painful one for me, and one I had to still coming to terms with, because I became a mother. Anyway, once she died, I started drinking and I would stop. I was able to stop and put it to something else. I found a wonderful person. My second marriage, I had a crazy earlier in my 20s, but a person who was very stable and safe, which may be another addiction of mine. As long as it's safe, it's okay. But he's not an addiction. That was a good relationship, but I thought, I'm not going to do any more acting. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to be a married woman. I had like a Volvo station wagon. I was living in a suburb of Los Angeles. I had stopped everything but being a mom because that was a big thing for me, to really devote that. But I still wasn't happy. And as soon as I could, as soon as it was okay, I'd stop breastfeeding. I was going to start drinking again, slowly but surely. And, it got to where the most important thing in the world, I was endangering. I was driving with my kid in the car. He was little, he was 2.5. And it was the one thing I, I thought, I was gonna do perfectly, and I was gonna do my best, and I wasn't gonna let anything get in the way of that. And to let that be threatened in any way, to drink instead of being fully present with my kid. Um, and it wasn't like I wasn't trying my best. It wasn't like I wasn't, uh, fully committed. So when I think of those times, I was very hard on myself after I got sober. Like, how could I have done that? And what is the long-term damage for my child? And then I got a lot of solace from talking to other moms that my child sees my striving, that, uh, I'm sober today. And I really have a soft spot in terms of being a sponsor to women with babies and children of all ages. Um, and I learned a lot of compassion for myself, because the level of beating myself up and the level of it's subtle. It's like my alcoholism. It'll go away and then it'll come again. The minute something happens with my son that I feel like, and that's all about me. I was talking about that beforehand with Mary. It's all about me when I'm worried about my son in so many ways. I first have to deal with that, and then I can deal with the situation, the next right thing in terms of what to do with my son. And luckily, I have a great sponsor and I have great fellows in the program where I can do that. But anyway, getting back to when I was drinking with my three, he was a 3. He had just turned 3. It was in 2006, October 15th. I went to therapy because I thought it was something else. And I'd been in therapy before, and she was an Al-Anon, and she recognized an alcoholic right away.
Mm.
As soon as I was honest with her, I'd been going to therapy for a while, but as soon as I said, I am drinking and I can't stop, you can't stop even if you want to stop. Well, I don't want you coming back here until you've been to an AA meeting, walked around the block, maybe go to someplace spiritual. Those 3 things you cannot do until you can't come back here. I was really insulted, and I thought, fuck her. But I actually did it because I'm nothing if not compliant, and I want to be thought of as a good girl, and I don't want anybody to say that I didn't do my best. So I did it that day. And I called up AA. I was living in Los Angeles at the time. Um, and I walked into I walked into a mixed meeting, which was not great, but that person on the phone said, there's a meeting right away. You can go right now. And so I went to that meeting and I heard just enough. And I didn't like that meeting, just so you like, that's in case you're newer and you don't like that meeting, there's other meetings. It's like, doesn't represent all of AA. Um, and LA, has 1,000 meetings a day, literally, at least when
Wow.
I got sober. And I got sober in the Valley of LA, the Valley section. And the next meeting was the one closest to my house that I had driven by, and I'd seen people standing out, and it was a women's meeting. And I was like, well, that's a sign. I'm going to go there. And I never left from that moment on. They were very welcoming and loving, and they didn't, when they looked at me, they didn't look at me the way I looked at me, which was full of shame and disgust that I had got myself in that position. Um, and it was the one thing I didn't want to be, was insane, like my mom. and and yeah, started going to this women's meeting. I eventually became the secretary of that meeting. I went to 90 and 90. There were many meetings at that church that was within walking distance of my house. And in LA, nothing's within walking distance, and that's a lot. So and that community in the Valley was a wonderful community, of which I'm still a part of. And then my husband got a job at SCAD, which is Savannah College of Art and Design in Savannah, Georgia, 4 years ago. And we decided to make the move here. And, I had become very comfortable in my AA in Los Angeles. I had a great community, particularly a smaller community of women who were more Buddhist, let's say, called the Loving Kindness Group, that we set up, that includes my sponsor at the time. And my sponsor, I was thinking, should I move to Savannah or not? And I talked to her and I was like, ugh, I might have to move to Savannah. Like, I wasn't wanting to go. I had everything there in LA, including my work. Um, and she said, oh, well, my mom got sober in LA and she lives in Savannah, and my sister. It's a great sober community. And I was like, oh, that's so weird. My own sponsor. I mean, that's just weird. So I went to some meetings that her mom had gone to and her sister were going to. And like every resistance I had to it was answered. And it was like, no, you're supposed to be here. And so I came here kicking into, but I did, even though I had a little contempt prior to investigation that they talk about in the big book, I still had enough muscle to go, okay, I'm feeling this, but let's investigate. Let's go there. Let's, see what it's like. And I got to some meetings. I went to something called the Clubhouse there. And I think it must be my second Clubhouse meeting. This girl came up to me and said, you might be interested in this new meeting that's starting. And it was the secular AA women's meeting, just getting its little legs in Savannah. And I went to that and I was like, whoa, and my sponsor was speaking at that, my current sponsor, Mary, all these people were there. And I slowly but surely, even though I was like, is this like AA? I was scared. It didn't do the 12 steps like as it was written in AA. It seemed a little loosey-goosey to me. And my first thing to any change is like, just like Savannah, like, I don't know this, and it's not like what I think. And I recognize enough of that now to go, okay, I'm going to have that feeling. I'm going to listen, but I'm also going to investigate. And the thing about secular AA, and I have to say, I have more sponsees. I'm much more involved in AA. I ended up starting a woman's secular like an offshoot of that on Wednesdays at noon, right before the pandemic. Like, I've never started my own meeting before, where I kind of found that, with Mary's help, of course, I never do anything without help and advice and counsel and running things by, but I had never been responsible for something like that. I've never taken that kind of action, and it strengthened me in AA. it strengthened my sobriety, not in AA, just sobriety in general. And my sobriety right now is so much stronger and richer and deeper. And I was most attracted to the open-mindedness in the secular AA. Oh my God, it's 20 minutes. Oh my
You're
God.
fine. You keep going.
Wow,
keep
I never thought and I'm sure people have
keep
said that.
going. You're great.
Keep
Okay.
going.
Well, now that I got to secular AA, what happened for me besides starting my own, and my sponsor in LA, I've gone back a few times, has talked about that, like how I've changed. Um, she's very by the book too, by the way, and I am not. I've never been. I've had a lot of issues, uh, but I respond best. And the reason why that sponsor in LA was my sponsor is when I had something to say, even if she disagreed, she was not threatened by it. It wasn't about her. It was about what I had to say. So I learned a lot about that. And coming to secular AA, my God, I've never felt more like myself. Because of who I am, even genetically, having so many different influences, I find it very hard to judge a group, and I need to see inclusivity now. And I've never felt like I have in secular AA. And I I've I've never been as active. So this must mean I'm at my own like I've never been as active. I've never been as willing to step up. I volunteer, I'm in service. I was before. I've gotten those muscles, in LA, but the way it was like I almost feel like it prepped me for being here. It's like they say in the prophecy, you don't know. I never knew how how my life was going to open up and the beautiful sponsees that have come in my life. I mean, I've s- the way that the women that I've met in secular AA and the sponsees that I've had have been such a kind of an anchor of my life. And I'd said that before, and I have sponsees in LA, but the way that they are here and the way that I sponsor too has completely changed. Um, I it's more about who I'm sponsoring than me and what I have to say, and following by the book. And I just, I mean, my own personal opinion is AA needs to open up. I see it slowly but surely changing, but it's so they're holding on so tightly to the way that things used to be, and I feel like secular AA has given me a kind of a roadmap of how to change and how to bring up ideas in my meetings in LA. But most of my sobriety right now is secular AA. I'm in contact with my friends in LA who are in AA. But I feel like secular AA for me has follows the principles more than the rules or the ideas of a personality. It's the principles of the 12 steps. And that's how I sponsor now. And I try to. I'm human. But it's so much more exciting to me now to be sober. Um, and I have so much more to learn if I'm in a space like this. And so I'm gonna oh God, it's been 20 minutes. So I'm gonna shut up. Uh,
Well, thank you.
yeah, I just thank you so much for
Thanks, Kimiko. That was awesome.
Yes,
Yeah.
it was.
Yeah.
So what I'm going to do right now, I'm going to go ahead and open up the phone line so anybody can call in if they would like to. And Kimiko, there was something you said that I could relate. A lot of what you said I could relate to, but when you were talking about how you learned how to adapt to your environment and become whatever you needed to become to survive, that was me. I grew up in an army family and traveled around a lot. And no matter where I lived, it could be overseas, it could be in the north, it could be in the south, it could be wherever. I would become whatever that culture was, you know. And when I look back in my early days in AA, I actually used that coping mechanism when I got into AA because it was really a foreign experience for me, and people were talking in ways that, was I didn't talk that way. I didn't grow up religious or anything, and so I used not knowingly, but I just did that because it was natural for me to do. Well, anyway, just to make it this short, after I realized I was doing that many, many years later, I was almost kind of critical of myself that I did that because I was like, why would I be such a conformist? But now listening to you, it's actually something I could be proud of because it was actually a skill to develop, to
Yeah.
be able to do that. And there's nothing wrong with that. It helped me survive and get through that time. And
Hmm.
and I guess recovery is a process of change, and I've learned to kind of grow beyond that and to recognize that. So thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanna say, I also moved around a lot, and that was definitely a couple almost like I went to 12 different schools, so, that was definitely a coping mechanism.
Hmm.
That can be a superpower and also something used against you, so when
Yeah.
the awareness in between it is where, my sobriety lies these days. Yeah.
It's almost kind of embarrassing when I think back to my youth about all the different characters I was.
It's great. We were
Anyway,
surviving.
yeah. But also, and I don't want to take up all the time because I know Mary's got something to say. Another thing that you mentioned that I could relate to from my own experience. My mother was mentally ill, and so I grew up in a household, and I also grew up in a household where there's a lot of yelling and screaming. And we talk about trauma now having an impact on addiction, and for the longest time I didn't recognize the trauma that I had, but now it just seems to be so plain now that why wouldn't I have not seen that was a traumatic experience, when my mother would get taken away, or she would have these episodes and we couldn't talk about them. I mean, it was in our family, it was uh, a subject that we just wouldn't bring up, and it was just awful. So yeah, yeah. So I can relate to when you're talking about that. It's just nice to have a kindred spirit who can understand that. And I still have mental illness in my family. I have a younger brother who's struggling with it as well, serious mental illness. So
Yeah. It's funny how people don't talk about things at when they're in your childhood. Like something big will happen and then no one ever talked about it. And how do we absorb that? And then it always comes out later, I feel. And, trauma awareness is part of maturing and part of recovery.
yeah,
And so I know that you're extra compassionate for people with mental illness now, Kimiko. I've seen that up close and personal.
Mhm.
So you have a compassionate vibe for that, which I appreciate.
Thank you, Mary.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, alcoholism is a mental illness
yeah,
too. So I so recognize it when people talk about well, of course, now I've dealt with a lot of alcoholics, but growing up an alcoholic, it's insanity. You
it
don't
is.
know what's gonna happen next. You have to pretend that everything's okay,
Mhm.
or at least that's the messages that you're given. Once it blows over, we're just nothing ever happened, you know?
Yeah.
And, um, and that's if you grow up with alcoholism, I totally understand that too.
Mhm. And
Yeah,
yeah,
I
people don't
I
wanna talk
just
about it. They don't wanna talk about alcoholism just like they don't wanna talk about mental illness.
Yes. Right.
Nobody wants to talk about the elephant in the room.
Mhm.
Yeah, except me. I'm usually the one that blurts out the thing that everyone is thinking, and
so
then I get the blowback for it, but I can't not talk about the obvious. It's hard for me to keep my mouth shut in those circumstances.
Bree has a comment. She says, "Yes, trauma. I never knew anything about that until I stumbled into secular AA. Post alcohol withdrawal syndrome is reality in itself."
True.
Yep. I never really understood it or thought about it actually until I met Angela,
Yeah.
and she was so into it. And, I never have even actually taken the time to read any of Gabor Mate's material on trauma, but I'm beginning to understand, what trauma is. And I think that I would take it to like the extreme levels, but just not being safe, not feeling safe, is traumatic in itself, or not being able to predict what your environment's going to be from one day to the next is traumatic. And you learn, I guess, over time to find different ways of coping with that kind of stuff that goes on. And I definitely see how addiction becomes a coping mechanism for that kind of stuff, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you telling your story, Kimiko, because you do have, I like what you said about you don't judge groups now or the
Mhm,
other because you felt like you were the other in so
mhm,
many different times in your life. And just the fact that you're Japanese American
mhm,
is considered to be the other in the Caucasian world, could be.
mhm,
Um, and so I know that you come from an awareness of that. And that's what I love about secular recovery is that I do feel it's more inclusive and diverse. And I'm looking for diversity in recovery. And like they say, recovery is not conformity. It doesn't have to be about conformity. And I felt like in traditional AA that it was all about conformity and it was all about parroting everything. And it was more about group approval than it was about your own recovery. And I
yes,
wanted, I think the principles are love, tolerance, and inclusion, and not that other parroting BS. Personally,
mhm, I totally agree. Um, oh, people are
yeah, people are commenting. Yeah,
yeah,
Fred says that his mother suffered from mental illness, including suicide attempts, after being sober in AA for 20 plus years. Wow. Yeah, it's a difficult thing. And when you talk about mental illness and mental health issues, it's ironic. Kimiko, you mentioned that alcoholism in itself, alcohol use disorder, is a mental health issue. But when I was a newly sober person in Alcoholics Anonymous, it seemed like talking about an issue that was outside of my drinking was forbidden.
it was.
And yeah, and it was like, if unfortunately at the group that I went to, and I'm not going to generalize that all groups are this way, but the people that I was around, those that were most vocal, were assuring me that my problem was I was an alcoholic and I shouldn't go to therapy and all this kind of stuff. But you know, I always thought the same way as you. I said, well, just being an alcoholic in itself is mental illness. Why wouldn't I be depressed or want to talk to a professional about this? But I did get that at that particular group, and unfortunately, I listened to those loudest voices. I think that there were the majority of the people in the room who were quiet
mhm,
would have been supportive of me doing whatever I wanted to do. But gosh, the people that are so dogmatic, they're the ones that speak the loudest, and they're the ones that will corner you and take you to
yes.
the, you know,
The woodshed.
yeah, and say,
I
listen to me. This is what you need to do.
usually, if somebody's really dogmatic is when I step away. I'm sensing that I'm right. This is the only way to do it. And what I love about secular AA is you're allowed to say what you want, and I'm not going to be threatened by that. I actually encourage you if you have something, a thought that you don't understand or it's negative or you're not feeling like you're a part of or what it is, please just talk about it. It's honesty. That's another principle. It's like so important. And if the group doesn't have a humility about it, a humbleness that, hey, maybe we have something to learn from what you have to say, instead of no, because I've definitely come from that tradition where you can't talk about anything. If you're an Al-Anon, you can't talk about AA, blah, whatever it may be. And you should be allowed to. I love the meetings where somebody's like, I hate it here. I hate you all. I fucking hate being here. And we'd be like, yay. Thank you so much for sharing. It's
Agreed.
so important to be
Yes.
honest.
And everything is what is outside issues. I mean,
Right.
if you got them, how can they be outside? I mean, they're part of life, and we have more similarities than differences, I think, as far as our addictions go. So I'm not into that you can't talk about it here thing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think just sharing whatever's on your mind at that moment is what you can share.
And
Yeah.
whatever you need,
Yeah,
to help you stay sober, therapy,
absolutely.
meds,
Yes.
whatever it may be.
Whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
about being honest and accountable for
And
it,
the
you know.
ego of someone telling you that you can't do therapy is just like
Oh, I was in a
beyond.
meeting where they said you can't take medication,
Yeah,
and this
I've been
girl had
told
to go
that
to the
too,
hospital.
unfortunately.
She had a
Wow.
mental breakdown.
Wow.
That woman was dangerous
Was that
and
in
very respected.
California?
Mhm. A
Mm.
huge women's meeting in a very respected, she's actually a therapist herself, sponsor. She had a little crew, was telling this woman that I know, "You can't take meds first,"
Yeah.
and no, she's bipolar. She needs to take
Yeah.
meds.
You know,
Yeah,
I thought
absolutely.
that that was a thing of the past, and my doctor told me no, that she still hears that from her patients, telling her that people in AA have told them not to do that, which is absolutely nuts.
Very
But
Totally
dangerous. Somebody's
nuts.
a
yeah,
doctor.
it really
Yeah,
is.
Yeah.
dangerous.
You were also mentioning, Kimiko, that you were talking about kind of your approach to recovery in AA. And I wonder if it was like me. It kind of sounded like you might be like me, where you may have changed a little bit. Were you kind of like a by the book person and then became less by the book? Can you kind of talk about your evolution and what how you approach
Uh-huh.
recovery now?
Yes. Oh, that's such a good question because I could only share what had been shared with me. And I had a sponsor who came out of Seattle. That's a very, I don't know if anybody's from Seattle here, but the A there is very by the book and very strong, at least her
Okay.
AA. And I had a sponsee who was a friend of mine, and we actually lost our friendship at a point because I I was like, you have to do this or you don't, or this is because that's the way and so I had to learn by experience. And then I come here and it doesn't look anything like LAAA, the secular one. At least that's what I was thinking. And I was threatened by it. And then so I looked and go, why do I feel scared? What's going on? I love these women. Why do I need to judge? And so I did evolve. And I've evolved so much. It's so different. Like before, if a sponsee has a different way of doing the
Yeah.
steps, I, I'm so open to it. I'm like, let's talk about this. It's their sobriety. I'm there to support their sobriety and help them not drink or act out. And definitely judgment is never, and shame, like Brene Brown says, is not a tool. So it doesn't work. If it worked,
It doesn't work. It
it
just makes
doesn't
more
work. It may
shame.
work
Yeah.
temporarily, like
Yep.
Haagen-Dazs or something, but all it does is spur that person into the same behavior, if not worse. I know that for myself when I shame myself. And or if I'm, telling my son what he should or shouldn't. He's very good at spotting that in me. What
Mhm.
did my friend said the other day? She said, see if you have a great program, you may have fans, but ask your closest family members what they think of your program,
Oh.
right? Ask my son, ask my husband how I'm doing today with my program. So, I've learned to just be much more open and less judgmental and towards what somebody else has to say. And I particularly love people in secular AA. It's just like people who are not alcoholics who got into AA. Now it's people who are in AA who've gone to secular AA. There's a
Yes.
softening, there's an openness, there's
Yes.
a spiritual depth, there's a non-judgment, and there's growth. There's growth. AA has, to me, stayed the same. It took them forever to change a group of people from men and women, like, what? Took a long time. So secular is opening up that way too. And to find it in the Bible Belt of the South, it's like maybe for every reaction, there's an equal and opposite reaction. And I feel like, wow, what a great gift it is to move to Savannah and find this. I don't know. It's probably in LA, but I didn't see it there where I was. And I can't wait to maybe bring that there too.
That would be awesome. But yeah,
Mhm.
Yeah.
the Bible Belt, I think there's such a need for it here because the traditional is so Christian
Mhm.
that so many people are looking elsewhere. And we have 4 meetings a week here, um, in this small town of about 300,000 people. So it just goes to show how popular secular A is and that there is such a need for it here.
Yeah.
Yep. So we
And,
have
and I
almost
like
4
how
face-to-face meetings here and 1 online. every
And I
week.
like how secular welcomes people who do have religion or who don't. It's not like
Yes.
you can
Exactly.
only believe this,
No.
it's just welcoming. And
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's gotta
it
be
shouldn't really
AA.
matter. It shouldn't
It
really
shouldn't
matter,
matter. No.
yeah, what anyone does or doesn't believe. And yeah, Dale points out correctly that LA had some of the earliest secular AA meetings.
Yay. You would think
Yeah,
LA, progressive
hmm
as it is.
yeah, there was actually this secular AA movement that, if you want to call it a movement, but the growth of secular AA meetings, I guess, really took off because of two women in Los Angeles. They belonged to the Hollywood We Agnostics group. And what was interesting is they loved this meeting. It was a secular meeting, and they would sat around in one of their apartments. Dorothy and Pam, they were in sitting in Dorothy's apartment, and they were wondering to each other. They said, "Are there other groups out there like this?" Because at that time, these groups weren't really communicating with each other, But you had these secular groups in New York. You had secular groups in I think you even had one in Atlanta at the time. You had them all over the place, but they just weren't connecting. So they found out that these other groups existed. They said, you know what, we need to have a party and invite all these people here. So they had their first conference in Santa Monica, California, in 2014. And from that, everybody stayed in touch. Social media was a thing in 2014, and it just grew from that. It was just an incredible story. So yeah, kind of out of LA is where all of this growth happened, really.
Hollywood We Agnostics.
Yeah, it's a great story. I love listening to. I love history, so to hear her story was pretty cool.
That is awesome. And, I'm in the Valley, which is kinda like if you live in the Valley, you never go to Hollywood or the West Side. It's like a
Hmm.
different town. It's like South Carolina to so
Savannah. Yeah.
I wasn't exposed to it. I was exposed to my little group of thousands of women, but they were in or well, I would say 1,000 women in the valley of where I was. And I would
Hmm.
have friends say, "Well, I don't believe in God." And this is a problem in this meeting because I have to accept that I'm agnostic or atheist. And they would talk about it out loud. I never felt judged that way as much in my meeting. Like if you didn't believe in God, whatever. But I don't know if she never talked about an agnostic meeting. I'd love to, if, in those big groups, talk about that. It wasn't talked about in my Valley women's group.
Hmm.
Agnostic AA,
Right.
beyond belief, and so cool. It started, and I don't doubt it. You
Yeah.
know,
I'm the same way. I was in AA for like 25 years and I didn't know anything about it. I
yeah.
didn't know anything about secular AA meetings being, existing. And it wasn't until I went through this process of where I kind of realized I was an atheist that I even started looking for it. And then it was just blew me away. Oh yeah. And someone mentioned here, I think it was Ross or someone, I think it was Ross mentioned, yeah, he Googled and it says that it started in 1975. So ever since 1975, they've had these meetings, and who knew? But I was like, I was doing okay. I was staying sober in my traditional group, and I was okay. And it really wasn't until I kind of some conflict happened or some discomfort on my part that I started seeking it out. And that discomfort came when I was kind of describing my evolution of thinking about the steps secularly, practically, rather than spiritually, and kind of dismissing the need for a higher power. When I started talking like that openly at my home group, that caused a lot of friction. And I think that's when I recognized that I needed to flee and start something else.
And you fled.
I fled.
And we're
It was
living in
either
such a
fight
great
or
time.
flight, they say, right?
Yeah, we're living in such a great time.
Yeah.
The meetings are there. I'm also part of this Asian AA group on Zoom. Like who knew? Because I could
Yeah.
tell you in my big meetings, women's meetings, there was maybe one other Asian gal there. And so I never saw that. And this meeting has like, 200 people on Sundays.
Wow.
And they've started in New York and LA and, things like that. So there are so many meetings out there to to help you feel like you belong. It's just taking that action like you did, right? You felt discomfort and you took that action. And then here's this community. I mean,
Yeah.
I feel so
Yeah.
lucky. Somebody
Exactly.
did
Go
say
ahead.
in the comments that they
Hmm.
wanted my phone number. How do I do that?
Yeah, they were talking about a WhatsApp number.
Oh, WhatsApp. Okay.
Yeah,
Do they
and
just look for my name?
I guess I'm not sure. I don't use WhatsApp myself.
Okay.
But yeah, if you were comfortable doing something like that, I guess we could send that to them, or you could put it out there on the notes. But you might not want to, because you might start getting calls from all
Yeah.
kinds of people if you
Okay.
just put it out
Okay.
there publicly. So
Okay.
um,
I don't know how to do. Yeah,
yeah,
I don't know how to
yeah,
communicate. I'm just gonna say hi to everybody
just
from
say
here
hi.
because I can't do comments. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, Dale's from Florida. Well, actually, he's not in Florida now, but he was in Florida for a long time. And so there was a group that was started there in 1985. I think the 1980s, and this is really interesting, was really a period of growth for secular AA meetings too, because a lot of the meetings seem to have started around that time, which was when I was first getting sober. But who knew? Who knew? You were also talking about sponsorship, Kimiko,
Mhm.
and I wonder if you might want to talk a little bit more about that, about how you do handle sponsees now, and how that
Mhm.
has changed.
Well, I followed their lead, right? Whereas before I'd be like, okay, this is how I did it, and this is the book I use, and this is this. I'm like, okay, what's a book that you're responding to? There's The Woman's Way Through the 12 Steps. There's, The Skeptic's Guide we were talking about today in an earlier meeting, and the Gentle Guide. There's all kinds of books, right, that have the 12 steps, and I follow their lead, and it's very different each time. Some people believe in God. I have a sponsee in LA. She's very kind of religious, and then sponsees here who are not at all, right? And so we follow and I, because my roots, like you, John, are so in traditional AA, the 12 and 12.
Hmm.
If somebody wants to, I have a new sponsee from my Asian group in on Sunday. She's just like, I want to just follow that book. So we go
Yeah, I could do
very
that too.
traditional. Tell me what to do. I have no issue with it. Although as we were talking about the first, second, and third step, she's not religious. So she's like, oh, mine is this and mine is that. So I can bring my secular AA experience, the other books that I've read, and the people I've talked to her experience too. So it's like they feed each other in a way. Um,
That's how I feel. I feel like I
yeah,
speak many different languages in recovery. So if you wanna do it the God way, I can do that.
yeah,
I can, if you wanna look at the steps in a spiritual way and communicate them, that's fine.
mhm,
If you just want to be purely practical, if you just don't want to have anything to do with them at all, that's cool
Yeah.
too. You
Same.
know?
Absolutely same. Yes.
exactly. And secular AA is so practical.
Yes.
It's a very practical thing. It's not woohoo. It's just
No.
practical. It's so
Yes.
practical. But if you have a spiritual, I love talking about, your spiritual path. I want to learn from you, my sponsee.
Hmm.
And I always do. I always do, no matter what. If I'm open and willing. So yeah, I'm really grateful for that,
Yeah.
and totally gobsmacked. Like, oh my god, how did this happen? You know, I never would have been able to predict it. And again, if I feel like somebody's, um, well, I just have a very open-minded sponsor and a lot of open-minded friends, and that's where I'm heading towards. It's just going to get more and more that way as I get more, have spent another day in sobriety.
I also like what you had to say about, it's their program. And one thing that I've learned is that, meet people where they are. Don't try to bring them where you are. And it's, yeah, I took this course on to become a peer support specialist. And one of the things that they always say is, find out what a person's goals are for their recovery, and then your job is just to help them reach those goals, and you do that just by sharing your experience and how you reach those goals, and figuring out what they want to overcome, and I think that's a nice way to approach it, and also point people to resources that they can access to help themselves.
To help themselves. Yes.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
I
Yes.
can't do it for them,
Right.
and I wish I could.
Mm-hmm.
I still have to stop myself. I'm like, "Oh, it's me
Yeah.
wanting to make them feel better. Can't do
No.
that."
And
No.
what you're doing, Kimiko, that is the best way to sponsor someone, in my opinion. And but sometimes, like if you're new, and I was this way to a certain extent, I was like, I just need you to show me what to do, and I will do it. I know I just need a path. I just need you to tell me what to do, and I can understand why people want that. But that comes with some danger. It comes with some risk because there's a lot of people out there who are more than happy to tell you what to do. But then again, you have someone like you, which
Mhm.
is really taking the correct approach, where you say, tell me where you want to go. How do you want to get there? And
Mhm.
that's more difficult for people to really understand. And so, yeah, so I always recommend to anyone who's looking for a sponsor to take your time and beware of the person who tells you that they know what you should do.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And they will tell you what you should do
Yeah.
24/7. Yeah.
Yeah.
There is that kind of sponsor and that, has a crew and they all do the same thing and they all, and they kind of lionize that person. And then I tell that person, well, then I'm not for you. You know what I mean? No, I'm your friend, but I'm not going to be able to, you know, every 5 minutes tell you what to do. Although there are the younger people in, like you were saying, the newbies, or like my new sponsee who does need a little bit of direction and wants it and tells me that. And it's per person, and it's not a black and white thing, a very cut and dry thing. And I used to be very threatened by that in the beginning. Like, what am I going to do? How am I going to do this? Tell me. And I might say the wrong thing and blah, 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 blah. And now I'm not. So I'm at that stage right now.
Mm-hmm.
But,
Mhm.
I pick up that phone a lot. I talk to other people, my friends in the program, a la Mary, and other people who I respect, who are further along than me, truth
Mm-hmm.
be told. And I get their feedback. We don't do this alone. Or at least I don't at
No.
all. Thank goodness, because my head, I don't know.
Not a
No.
good place to be by yourself.
Yeah, and I always want to be by myself. I love it. You know, it was
Yeah.
dangerous when I first got to Savannah. I do see what people say. Like, it's a very drinking town, John. It's like
Oh,
one
I
of
didn't
the
know
most
that.
drinking towns
Oh,
Really?
I've
yeah. It's all
ever
about
seen in.
drinking. Yeah.
It's
Oh,
like New
wow.
Orleans.
Okay.
It's like
I had no idea.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's open drink policy, all of that,
Open
and
carry, you can walk around drunk all the day
Oh
long.
my
yes.
Yeah.
gosh.
And my whole block loves to socialize. I love my neighbors more than anything. They're the most beautiful people. Nobody's sober here, but on my block. But they all love to get together in each other's backyards with a drink, starting from about 4 or 5 o'clock, and talk. And I'm here with my LaCroix with the other kids. And I thought in the beginning, I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? It was a little dangerous. I thought, God, I
Mm-hmm.
could drink. Nobody knows me. I didn't yet have my feet in secular AA yet. I didn't feel connected to the meetings here yet. So it was a tricky time.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad that, like I said before, the equal and opposite reaction, that the Sprite here is so strong and so deep and so open-minded that I drew to it even stronger, you
Mm-hmm.
know. So than I thought I would,
Yeah.
and it did save me. But those thoughts, maybe I can get away with it. Nobody knows me. I'm in the town where everybody drinks. These neighbors are great. They don't know that I'm sober,
Right.
you know, those thoughts. And now I go, okay, yeah, you're still an alcoholic. You think that way. I'm not threatened by any of my thoughts that way. I just know that that's par for the course.
Yeah. Well,
They
somebody
might
was
not.
asking. Go ahead,
Go
Mary.
ahead,
I'm sorry.
John. No,
No, go.
you go. You go.
I was going to say someone was asking for an update about ICSA, and I don't know. I just tell you what I do know. ICSA being the International Conference of Secular AA, and it is supposed to be taking place in DC. It will happen this time. It
Mm.
seems like COVID has settled down, so it will be taking place in DC, and it's going to be at the same time frame as it was before, which is that weekend of Halloween, October 31st to whatever. So that is still happening. But I will tell you this about the secular AA organization is they do need some help right now. And what they need is someone who can work on a website because their website needs to be updated. And
Yes, it does.
I'll be frank
Yes.
with you. I was the guy that was doing that for a while and I just can't do it. And I said, you know what? There are thousands of people out there that go to secular A meetings. There's got to be somebody who can do a website. So if you're listening to this and you know how to work on a website, a WordPress website, you can actually turn it to whatever website you want to. Contact the Secular AA organization at secularaa@gmail.com. Let them know you'd like to help, because I've done it. I've done that sort of service, and it was very rewarding while I was doing it. But it's got to be in your heart to do it, and it's not in me anymore to do it. I just have given all I can, so I'm not going to do any more of that. Someone else has to step up. Enough of that. So yeah. So right now, the information about the conference is not on the website. I don't think it's been updated yet, and they really need someone who can go in there and update that. So, but they will post it on the Facebook page and so forth. So, but yeah, it will be happening, and I do plan on going to that conference when it does happen.
Me too.
Yeah, it'll be
Yep.
fun. Have you been to one of those, Kimiko?
I haven't, although my husband's family's from DC, so
Oh,
I have a place to stay when it's happening. No, I've never been, ever.
yeah,
The pandemic kind of put a pause on everything here for my last 4 years of secular AA, or
yeah.
3.5. So, I'd love to go.
Yeah,
That sounds like
it was weird. So we had this conference in Toronto in 2018, right? And then we were supposed to
fun.
have one in 2020, but then COVID came, and then we thought, oh, we could have it in 2021, and no, COVID was still here.
And it might still be here in 22.
It probably will,
It
but
might be.
people, being vaccinated and everything, it's a little bit safer to do. So anyway,
I highly recommend it to anyone to just start thinking about it now, because the one in Toronto was fabulous.
that
And
was a good conference.
I met a lot of friends that are my friends now, and it was so supportive in where I was in recovery at that moment, that I took the energy from that conference and came back to Savannah and planted a seed of secular AA here. And 4 years later, now we have 4 or 5 meetings. So yeah, it's going to be in Bethesda Halloween weekend of this year.
That's pretty
Halloween.
good, Mary, that you got that many meetings in Savannah. How big of a city is it?
300,000-ish.
Wow, that's incredible.
Small town. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
But strong community.
I think, well, we do have meetings every day of the week now in Kansas City, I'm pretty sure. But the metropolitan area is a lot larger here. And that happened over a period of time, but it's really nice to have that, to have access like that. And are most of your meetings, are you back face to face now?
We have 3 face-to-face, 1 online, and 1 in the works to be face-to-face.
Okay.
So 3 are face-to-face. We meet either in a church hall or outside in a park.
Okay. Nice.
Yep. And the one in the park has like 40 people on Sundays, and so big we have to split into 2 groups.
That looks like a beautiful setting underneath that oak tree.
Yes, that's where it is. Yeah.
It's magical.
It's awesome.
Well, Kimiko, thank you so much for agreeing to come on and sharing your story. It was really nice to meet you. And I just love, this is the best kind of episode to do, where I can just sit back, have a cup of coffee, listen to someone's story, relate to it as I could relate to yours so well. Hearing your own story through someone else is, I think, the magic of AA, to be quite honest with you, to know that, hey, you're not alone.
You're not. Yeah. Thank
I'm
you,
part of
Kimiko.
a beautiful group. Thank
Thank you
you.
so much for being here.
So I'm gonna go ahead and sign off, and I'll make some announcements real quick before we do leave. If you're not familiar with the Beyond Belief Sobriety Facebook group, you can join it. Just go to Facebook and look up the groups. I'll post a link to it here in the show notes after the podcast is done, if you'd like to participate in that group. And also, we have weekly recovery meetings. So I think Ross was thinking that this might be like a Zoom meeting, and it's not. This is a live stream, but we do have weekly Zoom meetings for listeners, and we'll post information about that as well. And if you just wanted to chat with me individually, I have a calendar where you can book some time to do that. And I love doing that. Talking to all these different people from different walks of life helps me in my recovery, which is why I do that. It's really a selfish reason for me to help me with my life. So anyway, thank you, everybody. It was nice to have this chat. Bye-bye.
Bye, y'all. See you next week.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.